Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the Virtual Island Summit. Thank you for joining us for this session. My name is Christian Sakino. I am the Director of Operations at Island Innovation. I am from Margarita Island in the Caribbean, but I'm currently based in the beautiful coastal city of Vigo in Galicia, northwest Spain. I'm pleased to be presenting this session for you today. Island Innovation is a sustainable development consultancy, primarily focusing on islands. Our services include events, strategic communications, and capacity building. We are trusted by clients around the globe, and if you're interested in learning more about our work, please reach out to us using the contact information that is going to be shared in the chat. Before we begin, you should see a poll appear right now on your screen. Please let us know where you're connecting from and the sector and industry you belong to. While you answer the poll, let's speak a bit about this session, which is titled Financing Island Futures, Knowledge and Innovation for Resilience, Sustainability and Prosperity. This session is sponsored by one of our dearest clients, the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, CBF. We are honored to reach our 7th consecutive year of collaborations with the CBF throughout different events and projects, such as the recent Caribbean Climate Finance Congress 2025, which was held in July. The Caribbean Biodiversity Fund is a regional environmental fund established in 2012 to provide reliable long-term funding for conservation and sustainable development in the Caribbean region. Working with national conservation trust funds and other partners in 14 countries, the CBF aims to protect critical ecosystems, support climate change adaptation, and promote nature-based economies, ultimately ensuring that both the natural environment and the people of the Caribbean can thrive. This session is focused on securing financial resources and leveraging innovative solutions to address the unique challenges faced by islands and island nations. We will explore practical strategies for climate adaptation, financing renewable energy and blue economies, and diversifying island economies through technology and knowledge-based industries, ultimately working towards a secure and thriving future for island communities worldwide. I can see a lot of people participating in the chat from the Azores, Colombia, London, Charleston, Spain, the UK, Philippines, the US, Isle of Man, USA, and many other countries. Thank you for your participation. Now let's see the results from the poll. And I have here that the majority of our viewers are from the Caribbean region, which makes sense because we are in a Caribbean Biodiversity Fund sponsor session. But we also have a lot of people from Europe that are eager to see what's happening in the Caribbean. We also have a lot of people from North America, the Indian Ocean, Asia, and other regions. Thank you for your participation. Regarding the sector, most of you come from the private sector, but are closely followed by non-governmental organizations and governmental organizations. The industry, it makes sense that you are from the environmental services or ocean conservation industries with almost 30%. The rest are very varied between the other type of industries. Thank you and welcome. We are eager with your participation. So I invite you to please make use of the chat function to introduce yourself and where you're joining us from. You can make any comments during the session, but if you have any questions, please make use of the Q&A function. We will do our best to make sure that we can address them as many questions as possible upon the Q&A part of the session. Without further ado, I ask our dear moderator, Tanya Liu from the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, to take the floor. Tanya?
Yes, thank you so much, Chris. And also from our part, from the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, thank you so much for Island Innovation, for this partnership, for doing this together, and really pushing the sustainable development agenda for island states. So without further ado, I think Chris already mentioned it. We're going to talk a little bit about how financial resources can be leveraged through innovative solutions. it's really great to see that the majority or half of the audience is from the private sector, because leveraging private sector with public funding is really one of our target areas. And it's really an honor to be here together with three, well, myself and then two of my colleagues, the three program managers, I would say, from the CBF, and then two experts from the field. So without further ado, Rachel is going to kick us off with an introduction of what we do at the CBF. Rachel is an environmental project manager with a strong focus on sustainable development and waste management, specifically in the Caribbean. She's currently serving as the program manager at the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, where she leads efforts to manage marine pollution through the promotion of sustainable circular economy interventions. Over to you, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Christian, just checking on the slides that we're okay.
Up in 1 second.
I can start while we bring up the slides. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all joining us from across different time zones based on the interactions in the chat. It's truly a pleasure to be with you today as part of this session, and as Tanya mentioned, as part of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund team. We very much appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this creative space, important space where we're discussing these topics. As we would have heard at the heart of today's discussion, it's a simple, but we would say a powerful idea that financing must be coupled with knowledge and innovation if our islands are to thrive. So moving in on to next slide, we just wanted to set the scene in terms of what we do at the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund and how things align onto these topics. So we are the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, a regional conservation trust fund with the mission of ensuring continuous financing for conservation and sustainable development efforts in the Caribbean region. We do this by combining long-term funding mechanisms with the generation and exchange of knowledge, I would say. So it's a dual role, and throughout the presentation, I'll try to make those links where finance and knowledge is helping us, allowing us rather to help countries design and scale innovative approaches to island sustainability. On the next slide, we wanted to start a bit on the topic of knowledge sharing and innovation and collaboration by discussing the Caribbean Sustainable Finance Architecture. Our CSFA is an ecosystem of institutions and mechanisms that's built to ensure long-term and reliable financing for the region. At the core of the structure is the National Conservation Trust Funds. These are independent, nationally governed institutions that receive support from the CBF's endowment fund and channel resources directly to local conservation priorities. And because they are rooted in countries in the islands around us, they can quickly respond to national needs while aligning with global and regional commitments. So this makes the CSFA a bit unique. It blends financial stability with innovation. It connects our global donor support with local implementation and capacity development in the Caribbean region. And ultimately, for us, it's more than a financing mechanism. As I mentioned, it's a regional ecosystem for resilience. It's designed to grow, adapt, and continuously deliver resources as things change for us in the region. So topics across conservation, climate adaptation, and now with emerging issues, we continue to also focus on sustainable livelihoods via the architecture. On the next slide, we wanted to touch a bit on partnerships and the tone of knowledge sharing and information exchange and innovation. We recognize that partnerships are at the center of innovation, and they really are the engine of how we work at the CBF. We work with civil society, private sector, governments, regional organizations, as you'd see across the slide. And these partnerships ensure that the financing that we manage is de-risked, that innovation is encouraged and the solutions are scaled, so that they're not just national level, but we can create impact at the multiple island state level. So the networks become knowledge communities for us, spaces where we pool expertise, we share data, we co-create solutions. And we have a few that I would mention as the CBF that's driving the initiatives across the region. We have the Coral Health Forum and our climate change program, the Caribbean Connect platform, and our circular economy program. And then the conservation finance program, we've been doing a link up initiative where we bring knowledge and information exchange on different key topics. We do these on a quarterly basis. On the next slide, just to zero in on the program of work, as Tanya mentioned, we have three programs. Sorry, Chris, on the next slide. At the CBF, our work is structured around these three flagship programs. Firstly, we have the climate change program here, which strengthens resilience by supporting ecosystem-based adaptation. And these initiatives help communities adapt to the impacts of climate change. We have the conservation finance program. It's in the middle there, it's the foundation of our work. It provides long-term financing to protect biodiversity and critical ecosystems in our region. And the CSFA, the architecture that we explained, resides here under this mechanism. And then we have our nature-based economies program, which connects conservation with sustainable livelihood. And we are financing projects that reduce marine pollution while promoting circular economy solutions. So together, the three programs, we don't operate in a silo. The work complements each other. We create a holistic approach to financing resilience, sustainability, and prosperity in the region. And each program links financing with knowledge-based solutions, whether through science, policy, or practical training for the local actors and grantees that we work with. On the last slide, wrapping up, just a bit on our model. I would say here we're painting the picture of finance plus knowledge that's allowed us to achieve some tangible results. While we're channeling a lot of funding via international donors, we are seeing the direct impact with supporting local innovation. As you see there, to spread up the national initiatives across different beneficiary countries in the region. We also do regional programs that can bring this added value. So we have been engaging countries to national trust funds and other regional programs, and we're building experience across the board in sustainable finance. On the right, you'll see our KPIs. We hope that as you continue to follow us, we are working on reporting more at that level. So you would see a bit more in terms of the impact via the KPIs. So by the numbers that you see across the endowment fund and the climate change sinking fund and the nature-based economies sinking fund there, for us, it's about how this financing empowers local institutions to learn, adapt, and innovate, ensuring resilience and prosperity across our communities in the region. Our work is not isolated. You'd see that we have consideration to global initiatives, as we will be contributing to global sustainable development goals, the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We pay attention at that level to what's happening as we strategically approach interventions in the region. And then on the last slide now, just to close up, it really is just to demonstrate and emphasize that for us, the future of our islands depend on bringing knowledge and finance together. We recognize this. Creating financing pathways for us that fuel innovation and are strengthened by knowledge, and then also vice versa. It's important to think about it that way. So at the CBF, we have a few links here. We stand ready as a mechanism to support. islands. And for us, we just want to encourage you to maybe scan the QR codes as I wrap up. But if there's anything else, any particular area of interest to you, feel free to reach out to any of us. We have some contacts on the screen there also. And I'll thank you for your time, and we'll look forward to the rest of our discussions over the few minutes we have together. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you so much for everyone for putting their introductions in the chats. And also, again, just to remind everyone that we have a special Q&A button. If you go click down the Zoom link and you see the three dots, that is a special Q&A button. So we will be taking Q&As in the panel discussion if we have time. But for now, I'm going to introduce first the panelists. We have three panelists in our panel, and then I'm going to do one round of questions, and then we'll see if we have questions from the audience. We'll be happy to take them, so there's quite some interaction also with you guys. And of course, we are happy to also provide any responses in the chats and online also in the Q&A. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce the first panelist. He is Carlos Mayo. He is the CEO of Inoceana. Carlos is a civil engineer and ocean conservationist, founder of Inoceana, and a recipient of the 2025 Goldman Environmental Prize. He leads global initiatives connecting engineering, conservation, and nature-based solutions to build resilient blue economies, stop destructive developments, and foster long-term prosperity for island communities. So maybe whilst I do that introduction, let me just give Carlos his first question because he is on, I see. Thank you so much, Carlos, for joining us. The first question for Carlos would be, can you give us a little bit more of your experience, your background on how island nations can embed nature-based solutions into their core development plans so that infrastructure growth also strengthens climate resilience and ecosystems? Over to you, Carlos. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you to the Island Innovation and to the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund for having me here. I am Carlos. I am actually right now in Tenerife, but I work between Tenerife and Gran Canaria, Costa Rica, Fiji. My life is literally moving. And just to complete my introduction, that was amazing, by the way, Tanya. My father was an engineer. My father was working on building a lot of infrastructure in developing the coastal of Spain. So I always have that feeling of development in my heart, but also I love the ocean. So all of that conflict was moving me into questioning questions like why we're building so much without having a clear understanding of what is the impact on the ocean. And this year was very magical for me because after we were able to stop the construction of a big and massive port that was going to be built here in Tenerife, I was awarded with the Goldman Environmental Prize, and that was an eye-opening situation. I was like, oh my God, the world is looking at this as an example of success. So right now I'm developing with my team, with my organization in Oceana, we're working on nature-based solutions because we really believe that nature-based solutions is the angle how development needs to continue. But the opportunity is coming from governments, it's coming from funds, it's coming from philanthropy, because everybody, for first time in 10 years that I've been doing this nature-based solution approach, after I quit my job as an engineer, I've been seeing how there is more and more traction and more interest in, okay, we have a climate emergency, we have a lot of habitat destruction, what we can do to do things differently. And this is where nature-based solutions at the core of this solution. And we just need to align all of these big funds coming from Europe, big funds coming, unfortunately, not from the US anymore. But there is still a lot of funds that are trying to really support economies in a way that we change development. And sometimes it's about, instead of building a port, why we are not building mangroves or why we are not planting seagrass. So I think there is a reality there is a real synergy between funds and solutions to really protect the ocean, protect the land, and protect our future. And that's my longest story short. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Carlos, for that introduction. So really interesting to have you here and with your experience working across the different countries. So I'm going to the second panelist, and we'll come back to Carlos. And of course, please do again post your questions in the chat or in the special Q&A. If you have anything specific for Carlos, of course, please do indicate that so we can come back to the audience and post your questions to Carlos. So my second panelist is my colleague, Ulrike Kraus. She manages the third program. So you've seen Rachel and then myself, and then Ulrike manages what we call the third program. And that program is for climate change and the EBA facility, ecosystem-based facility. Ulrike is a German St. Lucian dual national with over 25 years of experience in natural resource management. Since 2014, much of her efforts are focused on climate change adaptation in the insular Caribbean. So Ulrike, for you, the first question would be, how has knowledge sharing innovated ecosystem-based adaptation in the Caribbean, and which lessons can you share with the audience from other islands? We're looking into, for example, innovative approaches for coral restoration, the peer-to-peer learning, but we're very keen to hear more from you on this topic. Over to you, Ulrike. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tanya. And I think we have a slide for that. Thank you, Christian. So yeah, coral reefs are one of the top ecosystems that we support in the EBA facility for restoration and conservation efforts. And very early, we realized that different grantees use different propagation methods. So we decided to bring them together in a restoration workshop, and one day focused entirely on coral reefs. And we realized there are a lot of valid propagation approaches depending on your circumstances. And that was an eye-opener for us, and we realized a lot more exchange is needed peer-to-peer between those practitioners. And that prompted us to found the Caribbean Coral Health Forum, which is basically an online exchange platform. It has a slow-paced MailChimp, and it has a more proactive WhatsApp group for those who really actively want to discuss their methodological approaches. You see the QR code there. If you have an interest in coral health in the Caribbean, you're welcome to join. Right now, we are looking at mapping and strategic sampling of corals to look for supercorals. You would all be aware of the 2 years of unprecedented bleaching and coral death in the Caribbean due to high ocean temperatures. And the objective behind is to prevent extinction and extirpation, of course, but also to enhance genetic diversity. And that can be done via different approaches. Assisted sexual reproduction. And again, here we had a wonderful knowledge sharing experience with one of our grantees, the Ocean Foundation. They worked in Cuba and the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic was very well advanced in sexual reproduction, and the Cubans have highly educated marine biologists, but no technology. So that project brought the Cubans over to the Dominican Republic to learn the techniques, and now Cuba is very well advanced with the funding through the EBA facility, CBF EBA facility, to reproduce sexual corals and have their own spawning calendar. So the objective is to select tolerant species and populations, breeding for tolerance to high water temperatures and disease resistant, and also to outplant in mixed clusters, also for asexual coral propagation, that they, once they mature, can sexually reproduce and exchange genes. In some islands, we already have some acroporids extirpated, which means they do not exist anymore. So there we are looking at assisted gene flow, that we bring in species that used to exist from neighboring islands, or also bring in some more tolerant lines to increase the diversity. And we all know we really have to scale up on those methods to rescue the reefs. And I just wanted to show you in those pictures on top the range of methods we have, from very high-tech laboratory, land-based nurseries on the left to very robust and rustic rope nurseries in the Grenadines. And they're all valid depending on where you are and what you're doing it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Ulrike. And again, really interesting work for anyone doing work on coral reefs. I hope you got a QR code, but if not, you can always reach out to us. You can find us on the website or on social media and reach out to Ulrike if you want to know more about the network of coral health. So I'm going to now to introduce the third and the last panelist. Again, we'll circle back to Carlos and Ulrike in a bit. But the third panelist, and I'm very, I would say, pleased that I can pronounce this name. Hence also the Dutch background. I am originally from Suriname. So Willemijn, that's how we pronounce the name, Willemijn. So Willemijn, first of all, sorry for that. Let me introduce you first because I'm getting all excited that I can pronounce the name. But Willemijn Peters, the CEO for Serious Business, is a renowned international game changer in the world of circular plastics. Being highly committed to preventing plastics from ending up in our environment, Willemijn founded Serious Business, an impact-driven company that helps major brands to close the plastic loop. So Willemijn, for you, can you tell us a little bit more about those innovative finance tools that are helping islands secure long-term biodiversity conservation? So over to you, Willemijn. Thank you so much for being here with us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks a lot for the kind introduction, and I'm happy to share a little bit more. We've been working a lot together with companies, but also with governments to try to see how to change that system in which plastics are currently being produced and used, and mostly also imported on islands, and how to change the dynamics, so really prevent plastic waste. If you allow plastics on your island, there needs to be an after treatment, and there's usually none. So can we think of a systemic change that would be more compelling with our current economic system? So making sure that the polluters don't only pay, but they also are involved in any operations for the end of life of their packaging or products. So that means we have built and set up projects that are focused on extended producer responsibility, having deposit return schemes, or any other types of collection methods that can either reuse or recycle used products and packaging at a fair cost. So making sure that there's also an end market, for instance, for recycled content. And we are trying to do more upstream measures. So really trying to see if you can reduce or restrain certain polymers or chemicals of concern, but also move more into reuse systems. So that is really basically cleaning and using it again on an island, which is actually a perfect setting, because then you don't have to import goods from faraway destinations.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much, Willemijn. So I see questions in the Q&A, so please keep them coming if there are specific questions for specific panelists, but also for Rachel, maybe if you have a specific question, please do indicate, and we can try to circle back. I do see some very technical questions, so we'll try to at least select some of those that the panel can answer. And of course, I do invite anyone in the panel and also from Island Innovation to respond to some of the questions directly in the chat and in the Q&A. So coming back to Carlos, the next question is for you, and that would be, how can tourism, and indeed very important for also for the Caribbean islands, but for all of the island nations globally, tourism is a very important sector. So can you explain a little bit how you see tourism and hospitality industries become drivers of nature-based solutions rather than sources of environmental stress? So over to you, Carlos.
Thank you. This is a very interesting question, and I want to zoom out a little bit in this question. The reality is, like, what is an island? The first question is, like, what is an island? No, and I always answer myself, like, an island is a place that in Google Maps disappear when you zoom out. It's a place that doesn't almost exist. It's small, it's in the middle of the ocean, it's normally beautiful, and it's very fragile. So that creates a combination of everybody wants to go to islands. This is the case of the Canary Islands, where we have 15 million tourists every year, which is a very, very big number. But that amount of tourism can be having a very big impact. So development, all of the pollution. Just in Tenerife, that is a 100-kilometer island, we have 550,000 tons of plastic produced every year. Like, what we do with all of that plastic, right? So on the other side, the tourism industry is starting to understand that people are more and more keen to be ecotourists and driver, like basically we call it tourists with a purpose. So basically people are not just traveling, they are having a real purpose. So I think we need to push the companies, especially, into this direction with the help of the governments, because they have the regulations. But at the end of the day, this is a win-win. I think if companies understand the niche, the capacity of revenue that they can move by doing the things in the right way, it's just a win-win for everyone. And so from my perspective and with my organization, that's what I'm just coming now from a hotel, at one of the biggest hotels in Tenerife. And I've been speaking 3 hours with the general manager about solutions inside the hotel they can implement. And it's actually going to reduce expenditures of the hotel. So it's like there is a lot of opportunity. We just need to work together and to really talk to the companies and make sure that they understand the huge opportunity of doing the things in the right way. It's not about stopping threats. It's about changing the system and how it goes. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Carlos. Yeah, very interesting. And yes, tourism definitely for our region here in the Caribbean is very important. So going then to Ulrike again. So Ulrike, where's my question? Yes. So building on the amazing work, I think, on coral reefs, can you indicate what some of the common success factors are to identify an impactful ecosystem-based adaptation project? Over to you.
Thank you, Tanya. That is a very good question. And I think the most important thing, and I alluded to that earlier, is that one size does not fit all. I put up a map there where we work with the eBay facility, and to many of you, there might just be little specks on the map, and I can't blame you for that. But every island is different, has different needs. So I showed you the high-tech coral approach that works well in the DR, but it's beyond the maintenance capacity of most islands. I showed you the rope nursery that's extremely cheap to install and robust. And I thought it might be ideal for Haiti, but my Haitian partner said, no, Ulrike, those ropes would be stolen immediately to tie boats and lifts. So we really have to take the socioeconomic factors into account and involve the communities throughout. From the planning of a project throughout the monitoring, evaluation, and learning cycles, they want hands-on, be involved, and that creates stewardship and ownership, and very importantly, beyond project duration. Our projects are only for 3 years, and we want the outcomes to be maintained. So by then, we need the ownership, and the communities are really the ones who have to keep it up. Also, the NGOs that are largely our grantees, they can't do it by themselves. They need alliances. So during the project, we have to promote interinstitutional and intersectoral alliances to create strong networks. And we noticed that the best approach is a bottom-up management cascade, that we start from best practices that prove themselves in a certain place to work up towards policy and regulations, and that we scale from successful local government's efforts to the national effort, rather than come in with paper laws and regulations that will not be complied with and cannot be enforced. I already mentioned how important it is that we have local and context-specific stakeholder engagement. So the biophysical and the socioeconomic factors are important and have to be taken into consideration. The purpose matters. Do I want to produce coral as quickly as possible? Then I would go for asexual reproduction and maybe bio. Or do I want to maximize genetic diversity? Then I might go for sexual reproduction. And we have a couple of rich to reef projects that also offers influence coral reefs. And we have to be very conscious of what I call the influence to interest matrix. So you might have a 2-acre smallholder farmer with a mixed agroforestry system high up in the watershed. That farmer has a lot of influence on what happens lower down, but has very little interest in coral reefs. You have another 2-acre smallholder farmer with similar crops in a mixed agroforestry system lower down. That person has very little influence, but is very much affected by what's happening. So statistically, those two farmers look the same, but they are very, very different stakeholders when you actually do projects with them. So the key is adaptive learning and an exchange of lessons, because when our projects come to an end, we want to leave behind strong local institutions, empowered communities, and enduring networks of learning and support, so the project outcomes and goals are being upheld and enhanced. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ulrike. Yeah, Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, I'm just checking if my camera was working. Thank you so much, and very interesting. So I will go now for the last question for Willemijn, and then we'll try to see if we can take some questions from the Q&A. So Willemijn, the question would be, what role do innovation and partnerships play in scaling island solutions for resilience and prosperity? Over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think partnerships are key, especially if you look at biodiversity. The impacts of plastic pollution on biodiversity is not just a one single source item. You need a set of different stakeholders all having their solutions in place. So you need policymakers to really make the straight boundaries and make sure that there's a level playing field. So both importers, producers, and company users are abiding by the same rules. But you also need industry players to come together, especially if you're talking about systemic change. For instance, if you all start reusing beverage bottles, or if you start using refill systems, then having a shared infrastructure and shared collection, that makes all the more sense. It's going to be much more cost effective, efficient, and easier to understand for consumers. So you need both the industry playing together, so maybe sometimes even competitors, but also industry and governments playing together. The civil society obviously is key as well, because they play a major role in communicating and advocating and getting like the general public involved. So having all these players on board and also having critical thinkers in it to see if indeed something works for that local context or not is quite key. So we've seen that having a set of broad stakeholders involved in any type of systemic change on avoiding plastic waste is literally key. So that goes for reuse, but it also goes for recycling. Recycling in theory doesn't mean a thing if there's no buyer of the recycled content. And sometimes that's really an issue on islands. So there needs to be an off-taker, and then making sure that that system is viable is a shared responsibility. And mostly of the people who put plastics or packaging on the market, and that has generally an impact on the biodiversity, they have a major role to play, and they can. So I think having people together in this forum also really helps to create that understanding and see how players can play a role.
All right. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Willemijn. Yes, I promised that I would see if we can do some interaction with the audience. I'm just trying to find a question that is not too technical, because, for example, I do see one on greenhouse gas inventories. Let me just maybe see if Ulrike, if you think you would like to talk a little bit about greenhouse gas inventories. It's a very long question. Do you think you want to take this one or no?
No, I think I could talk about the one to
The
to the Hurricane
territories
5,
or the
Cat
Hurricane
5, if
5?
you
All right.
want
So
me to.
let me read that one out. Yeah. Okay. Let me read that one out. So the question from Eric Salamanca from Turks and Caicos is, do you think a nature-based solution can withstand a Category 5 hurricane? And do you believe that marine energy technologies for clean energy sources can coexist with nature-based solutions? Thank you so much, Eric. And over now to Ulrike, and of perhaps if Willemijn and Carlos, if you want to jump in on the same question, very happy to. But Ulrike, if you can kick off, thank you.
Now, Hurricane 5, Category Hurricane 5 will always do damage. There's no question about it. But we do have evidence that nature-based solution, EBA approaches, can withstand Cat 4 up to Cat 5. When Hurricane Beryl passed through the Grenadines, the eye actually reached Cat 5, and the rope nurseries that I showed earlier were right there where the eye passed, and they had negligible damage, whereas the surrounding reef was completely crumbled up. We also had a mangrove restoration on Union Island, where the hurricane had a strong Cat 4 strength. And there was some ecotourism installment picnic tables. They were all lost except the ones in the restored mangrove. So there are two examples. And a little further north, where it was Cat 4, we had a coastline stabilization intervention on mainland Grenada. And again, in the areas that were protected by the EVA project, there was less coastal erosion and less flooding than in the areas that were not protected. So I would say to that part of the question, yes.
Yeah. Let me see. Carlos or Willemijn, anything to add to this question?
I think from my side, if we're talking about plastic pollution and funding mechanisms and Hurricane 5, I would say Hurricane 5, that's detrimental for everything. But if you have single-use plastics, they're going to be all over the place afterwards. So if you take good care of your resources and have reusable pools and use less in general, it will also create less damage afterwards. But of course, this is a natural disaster. I think you can try to, I'm always more about preventing. So if you're looking at reducing plastics usage and the negative effects, we're trying to prevent a huge increase in the use of plastics, and that will also come with a decrease of CO2 emissions. We're trying to prevent these hurricanes from happening in the first place by reducing CO2 emissions. So I think the right way to go is actually trying to make sure that you're reducing these natural disasters and trying to make sure you're not just leaving all your resources outside in terms of single-use plastics, and just trying to do reduce your impact to the minimum, I think. And through this webinar, I'd like to increase our handprint, so really pay it forward and say, like, okay, what are the positive things you can do to actually reduce the negative impacts? So that's a bit from my side.
All right, thank you so much, Willemijn. Carlos, anything to add?
Yeah, very short. I am not an expert on mangroves. I've never been in front of a hurricane category 5, so I want to be very careful about how I answer this question. But if you ask me, like, you prefer to be in front of a hurricane in an island surrounded by mangroves, or an island that has been developed and all the mangroves is cut, I would say with the mangroves. And also I would say that not because the mangroves are going to protect against the waves and against the storms, also because those mangroves are supporting the fight against climate change. So in further years, probably that's going to help those hurricanes to not to get crazy as they are probably nowadays going.
Indeed, thank you so much, Carlos. So I see a tourism question from Frank Biasi. Let me just take that one because I do think that our panel can address some. So maybe Carlos, to you, because you did mention tourism industry, but of course, again, Willemijn and Ulrike, please feel free to jump in after Carlos. So the question is, as more of a problem or solution in the areas you work, and how should we shift the impacts from negative to positive? Carlos, you want to kick us off on this one?
Of course, I try. It's a very interesting and difficult question, but the reality is that every island in the world is almost unique, is almost different. Like it's hard to make an answer to so many different situations. But the reality is that tourism is the result of development, is the result of economies growing, the result of having people having better lifestyles, like being able to travel away, having airports. So in that sense, you look at the islands, and I'm going to make a good example here. In Cape Verde, in Cabo Verde, that is not far from the Canary Islands, not many years ago, the population was eating sea turtles. That was like a normal thing, and they were creating a problem with the population of sea turtles. Well, nowadays, that population have the tourism, and they are able to import products from other places. So I think the tourist could be a good tool if it's managed in the right way. But on the other side, if the tourist is not managed in the right way, you can really destroy a place very quickly with the tourism. So I would say it's a lot depending on the willing of governments, but also a lot on the society and how people really want to protect what they have, let's say.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Ulrike, do you want to add some thoughts to this question? And then I'll go to Willemijn.
After this one, thank you.
No, Willemijn?
I am happy to add a little bit more. I think building on what Carlos said, it is really up to the community deciding how they go about tourists. On average, if you have a 2-week holiday, you're creating, as a tourist, more waste than you're doing than the rest of the year. And that is typically because you go to places where you don't understand, or there is no infrastructure for your waste. So that's having a detrimental effect, period. However, some destinations have implemented policies and strict rules for the people who come into their destination, and they have managed to turn it into a positive effect. So using the volumes of scale and the positive aspects of tourism to create more living wages for, you would say, like more self-sustaining tourism. So instead of hunting whales, to have a look at whales, instead of taking away fish, to really do some scuba diving. So changing the livelihoods as well. And you can make really strict, like the Palau pledge at the front, if you have people enter your country, to make them pledges on how they leave your beautiful island, instead of just taking it for granted. So I think there's a very positive things, apart from like tourist tax, that can be dedicated to certain improvements or building infrastructure to actually deal with waste or other issues like drinking water, that otherwise would not have enough funds or volumes of scale to make it self-reliable. So I think it could have a positive effect, but it really depends on the policy measures and the rules that you set as a country.
Yeah, thanks so much, Willemijn, for those insights. I'm going to the next question. Let's see if any one of the panelists want to take this one. That's from Jerry Cronin. And the question is, what financial considerations or barriers, if any, for adopting marine renewable energy technologies as part of a decarbonization strategy? So maybe we can just, not maybe focus specifically on decarbonization, but some financial considerations, barriers let me see if any of the panelists would like to share some thoughts. I'm just going to open up this to the panel without giving anyone. Willemijn?
I
Yeah?
think what I've seen before is in SIDS that we've worked in, is that either it goes for renewable energy or for other types of infrastructure. You need to do investments, obviously, upfront, and it needs to be worthwhile. So you need to have a sort of a return on investment that makes sense for that island. And sometimes it doesn't make sense to build infrastructure just for one SIDS, but you need to have a regional approach. And I think it's really good to make that calculations beforehand before you immediately jump to one solution. It's also true that some solutions have certain advantages, but yet another set of technologies have even bigger advantages. So it's good to make a comparison and decide based on that. And that goes for generating energy. So if you're going to go wild on solar or wind or tidal or whatever types of energy, but it also goes for waste treatment, and it also goes for water infrastructure. So I think it's smart to have a look at the size of population and the tourism flow, but also in terms of lifespan. You're looking at like 20, 30 years, what will happen in terms of dynamics and in terms of technology developments, to see if it would be worthwhile. A lot of cities still depend on fossil fuels, so it is a very strong statement, like I think Aruba is doing, to really move away from fossil fuels and build on your own resilience and independency. Especially in these times, I think it's very strong, but you need to look ahead and make a decision on how you're gonna manage those as well. So for instance, you could choose for certain business models that where you don't purchase your energy infrastructure, for instance, but you start leasing it. So you will have an upgrade and maintenance over time, and that's what you're paying for on a yearly basis. So those could be interesting models also for SIDS to have a look at. So you're investing in a certain technology, but you're not investing in a status quo, but in a development path on that route. So I think that would be a strong suggestion there.
Thanks, Willemijn. Let me see if there are more questions, so no pressure for Ulrike and Carlos, but any other thoughts on this question from Carlos and Ulrike? No.
I guess I just want to add, I work in my other life, I work as an energy engineer, and I have a lot of friends working in that field. And things are difficult. Like islands are, for example, archipelagos, they have different infrastructure, they have different like weathers. And here in the Canary Islands, we have so many different weathers. So it's also about creating a balance between all of the islands in the electricity system. So you need to connect cables underwater. So these projects we're talking about multi-million-dollar or euros projects. So it's really, really a lot of investment.
So much, Carlos. All right. If there's no other intervention for this question, I'll go on. I see people are warming up and putting up more questions in the chat, so that's good. Elizabeth Bain, this is specifically for Carlos, but again, I think I would like to open up the floor if Willemijn and Ulrike also want to add some thoughts. Carlos, how do we encourage communities to build tourism in a sustainable way that maintains their existing ecosystem? And do you have an example of success that you want to share with us? Over to you.
I think I do. So I think communities is the first thing when it comes to marine conservation. If you don't have a community aligned with your project, you don't have a project. That's my thought. I think communities are at the forefront of the ocean when speaking about coastal communities. And the buy-in of the community is something you need to deal with. And it's so difficult because communities involve different people, different organizations, different minds, different interests. So how to deal with that? I think it's about talking a lot with them. I think it's about working a lot with them and going into specifics. I have a good example of Costa Rica in the Pacific South of Costa Rica. I have a team of people working there, and we partnered with the indigenous community, with the Borucas. That was a community that used to live by the ocean, but when the government started creating national parks, they moved up them to the mountains, and now we are helping them to come back to the ocean, and we are bringing back all of this knowledge and all of this connection with the ocean they have, and we are trying to implement this into marine conservation. So I think it's about not accepting that the past has a lot of information that we need to rescue and not to move over without that.
Thanks, Carlos. Ulrike, please go ahead.
Yeah, the ecosystem-based projects also always involve the community and sustainable livelihoods. So it's a two-pronged approach. One is public-private partnerships. So we do try to work with the dive shops, with the hotels, etc., but also with the communities and the people who do the everyday job on the run there. So we have people who provide some food. We work with dive shops, and some of our coral gardeners are actually coming from a deprived area. And that also relates to one of the questions on the donor pressure for high targets. And I took the donors then. I said I could have had secondary school graduates to become coral gardeners and be scuba certified. But we deliberately opted for those kids out of the deprived neighborhoods. And they are functionally illiterate. They cannot read a dive manual, but they're much appreciative that they are given a chance. So that's how we involve the community. It is slower progress than if they had gotten somebody out of secondary school. But it leaves behind a more sustainable community structure because those kids cannot get another job. But some went to the hotel now as dive not dive instructors, but accompanying dives as dive masters or rescue divers. We train them up to rescue dive level. So that is one opportunity. In Cuba in particular, in Haiti, just catering for meetings is a livelihood, and producing it nearby on your own farm is a livelihood. So there are little successes, and I think sometimes we have to show that little is more. And that relates to another question in the chat. Yes, there's pressure from the donors, and we do report to ICI, International Climate Initiative indicators, but we are very blessed with our donors, with the ICI and KFW. We've taken them to the field, and sometimes I just have to say, listen, having these ghetto kids is the better approach, although it's slower. Or mangrove restoration. I can have a big continuous area in one place that's easy to reach, and my team works in one site. But on small islands, I might want to protect multiple mouths of small watersheds against runoff and sedimentation. So fragmented, smaller acreage might do more good and have a better impact. And the only way is to take people there, site visits, seeing it firsthand. I'd say those 10 hectares fragmented are worth more than 80 hectares continuous. And we are blessed with our donors that they really listen to us and take our word for it and see it for themselves.
Yep, thanks, Ulrike. Willemijn, do you want to add some thoughts to this question on the communities? And nope, okay, we're good.
Nothing to add. All great answers.
Yes, all right, great. No, and I just saw indeed in the chat that you responded to the I would say that's the question, right? The elephant in the room, and how do we, and maybe I just wanted to ask if Ulrike and Carlos have anything to add. The question from Frederick Warner V from Coastal Aid is, how do you all think we can speed up and scale up the gap in funding for the transitions in work? How do we fill up the gap from 300 billion to 1.2 trillion with private capital? So basically, I think the question is, yes, we know there is a financing gap, right, in sustainable development. And we already know that we have to do more. We have to work more with private capital. We have to accelerate interventions because, yes, we're losing the coral reefs, we're losing the ecosystems. And I think that's the general question that I wanted to see if Ulrike and Carlos have any closing remarks, because we do have to close also. So let me hand over. Thank you so much for Willemijn for responding in the chat itself. But let me see, Ulrike or Carlos. Ulrike, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we know we have a financing gap, and of course, that is the kind of discussions that at the highest level at the COPs and so forth. But we should not forget that it's also important to make sure that money that we get actually does work on the ground. And I see a lot of money sinking into salaries and travel and into obscure black holes. And I must say at the CBF, we are really proud that we focus ourselves on getting the money out there, that it does some work in those islands that we understand because they have different needs. And that is something very important. That is also something we have to show to the donors, that we actually cost effective and have an impact for the dollar they spend. And I think that will help us raise more funds.
Yeah,
Carlos.
Yes, I will add to that. I think that's a brilliant question and very good answer. The money is there. We all know the money is there. I think we need to go from solutions to actions. I think we are ready to do it. Like, we have the technology, we have the companies, we have the people already with awareness. It's about like really taking the one step forward. I've been 10 years working on this, and I see the same conversation going on. And when I was speaking to big funders like the Nature Alliance or any of those, all of them are like, we need action. We need to connect everything and everybody to jump in the water and to work together and to make solutions, not to talk about solutions. We need to implement solutions. That's my part.
No, thank you so much, Carlos. And I think with that, we didn't get to all of the questions, of course, but I think we made the connections here. I think we have reached out and we have contact information. So please do reach out if you have any other question for any of the panelists or for CBF or for Island Innovation. I think we're all connected. I think that is what we mentioned, the connectivity. Thank you so much to technology right now, right? That we're all connected from different places in the world, that we can share these lessons learned from different places in the world and really indeed embark on action, as Carlos was saying. I want to end with that the words of Ulrike also, where we are, I would say, where we are situated as a regional conservation trust fund, we can also say that funding is usually not the biggest challenge. It is not. It might seem so, and then yes, governments say and NGOs say yes, but we cannot access this funding. But it is not. The biggest challenge, indeed, what Willemijn was saying, is this, the governance structure, political will, making sure that government knows what they want and to be able to connect the different dots. We would definitely, as a conservation trust fund, I can definitely say funding is not the biggest challenge. The money is there. It is how we can use it effectively and efficiently and make those dots that Carlos and Ulrike and Willemijn mentioned, making sure that we can work together and do things right now. So with that, thank you so much for everyone for joining this panel, for your questions, your interactions. Thank you so much to all my panelists, to my colleagues, to Rachel, and to Christian. And I think with that, I'm going to hand back to Christian, right? To close us off. Thank you so much.
Tanya, and as for usual, I love your remarks. And ending on that note, I think that's the message that we all want to convey. And we're so grateful for our continued partnership with the CBF. So there's more to come, of course. I want to thank you for moderating this panel. Thank you, Ulrike, Willemijn, Carlos, and Rachel for your contributions as well. So thank you everyone for attending to this session. I have some announcements before we wrap up. If you missed it on any of the previous sessions or in our opening session, we want to let you know that we are partnering with the Cabildo of Gran Canaria to host the Global Sustainable Island Summit 2026. After this year's experience in St. Kitts and Nevis, now the Micronesian region and Europe take the spotlight. The summit will be held from April 20th to the 22nd, 2026, and we will be discussing solutions and advancements in sustainability. Please note that all attendees of the Virtual Island Summit can get an additional discount on the early bird ticket using a special coupon that my colleagues are sharing in the chat. Also, don't miss the opportunity to enroll in the new Island Innovation course, Sustainable Islands, Strategy, Finance, and Leadership for Innovation. Take a look at the link in the chat for more information. Our next session is coming up in 55 minutes, and it's Future Economy Strategies, How Islands Are Redefining Economic Success. Don't miss it. Thank you, everyone, and we will